We're about to start the first stress bonding sessions for the rabbits. I made this small NIC box. This is how I prefer to do stress bonding, and I'm going to discuss some of the other methods later and why I don't love them. So I've made this NIC box for Sachin. He's already been in this box for around 10 minutes, which I guess it could seem mean, but it's actually the better thing to do because Bachin is the one initiating most of the fights. So if I let Sachin get in here, get a little bit more comfortable, when Bachin comes in, he's going to kind of have the upper hand, if you know what I mean. I also like to put them somewhere high up because they're a lot less hesitant to jump out. Also, before we even start, you have to make sure that both your rabbits are healthy and that they've eaten a lot of hay, and just make sure you understand rabbit body language so you know how they're going to do. Also, it's very likely that they could fight, so I have a dustpan and broom here, and I also have another box if I really need to separate them, and I have another grid, so I can add them in a little bit, like more slowly. So I like to start with the grid in first, just so they can kind of be around each other, and they're already in a pretty stressful situation. You can already see Bachin looks uncomfortable, but I'm going to lightly shake this, just to hopefully help a little bit. They can still get to each other if they really want, but hopefully the idea is that they won't because they're too stressed. I like to do the bonding process very slowly, so I'm going to let them be in this position for a couple of minutes just with the grid in between and just rocking them back and forth. Now, I do want to take a couple minutes to talk about stress bonding because I think it's so severely misunderstood. And I think one of the reasons that a lot of rabbits don't bond properly is because people don't utilize stress bonding correctly. Either in the case that they're not using it at all, or in the way that they're using it is actually very incorrect. So what is stress bonding? Stress bonding is simply putting two rabbits in a stressful situation. Some people do this at the very initial stage of bonding as a way to introduce rabbits to each other and reduce fighting. Other people do it once their rabbits are somewhat bonded or familiar with each other, but there's still a lot of fighting. And sometimes people even use it in between bonding to just strengthen their bond. For example, if you have two rabbits that have kind of been on and off for a little bit, or maybe they've even been living together for a week or so, but you feel like their bond isn't at best, this is a great way to strengthen it. The basic idea is that your rabbits are in a stressful situation, and because of that, they're less likely to fight, and they're going to seek comfort from each other, which just strengthens their bond. The same thing happens with people. Do you ever have friends where maybe you wouldn't ordinarily get along, but you have something in common, like you both went through a divorce at the same time, or you both had a really terrible math class together, and now you're bonded for life? Things like that. Some people have the misconception that stress bonding is cruel and unnatural. I think it's a little bit funny because stress bonding is bound to happen whether or not you plan for it. Even something as having rabbits that are already bonded and then maybe you have to take them on a vacation with you somewhere, or that you move house, that's a very stressful situation and they're going to seek comfort from each other. Another example is if your rabbits are just in your house and you hear a really loud noise, those rabbits are going to run to each other for comfort. That in itself is all different types of stress bonding. However, I do completely understand where people are coming from because I think there's a lot of people who don't understand and take it way too far. For example, if your rabbits have never seen each other before, they're going to view each other as competitors in each other's territories, and I don't think that in introducing rabbits for the very first time, I would not recommend stress bonding. I think stress bonding is better when you have rabbits that have either already been bonded and like mine have had something that have just kind of broke the bond, or they've just been fighting a little bit, or if you have rabbits that have already been introduced a couple times, or maybe they've lived next to each other for a while and you just feel like they're not doing well to get along. There's also a lot of different types of stress bonding, which is why I think it gets such a bad rep. One type of stress bonding, which I definitely do not recommend, is bathtub bonding. It's funny because I see so many people on YouTube recommending it, but rabbits don't have any pads on their feet the same way dogs do. So when you put them on a slippery surface like a bathtub, the idea is that they feel stressed out and they're less likely to fight, hence the stress bonding. However, I think this is just extremely dangerous because rabbits have extremely sensitive spines, and when you're putting them in a bathtub where they have zero grip, it's very possible that their legs kind of slip out under them. I'm not sure if you guys have seen how rabbits move, but their weight is not very evenly dispersed the way that a dog is, so they have a lot of power in those hind legs, and it's very probable that they can really hurt their spines. I also feel like it's just not the most effective, and I feel something like this where you can control the amount of stress. For example, stopping the shaking greatly reduces the amount of stress. Giving them a slightly bigger space can sometimes reduce the stress. Putting them off of a high surface onto the ground can reduce the stress. I think something like this is a lot better. Another stress bonding technique is to carry your rabbits around in a carrier for a couple of minutes, or even take them on a car ride. I think the car ride is a really good idea as long as you're not the one driving. If you're going to try to be driving and you're trying to watch your rabbits, I think that's just a disaster waiting to happen. I don't love the idea of carrying your rabbits around because, again, I think it's really easy to miss fights. And rabbits are very adorable, but they're also very vicious. And when you're not watching them, they can definitely take chunks out of each other and cause a lot of damage. And I don't ever think you want bonding to be so stressful that it inflicts pain on your rabbits. So I don't recommend carrying them around the house. I've also seen some very extreme forms of stress bonding. I'm just barely shaking it and I'm giving them breaks. This is not a roller coaster. Rabbits are very sensitive. They're prey animals. They already have a higher heart rate. You don't want to be stressing them out to the point where they're not going to eat and they're going to be traumatized. Also, for the most part, stress bonding shouldn't affect the bond with your rabbit too much. But if you're creating this super traumatic situation, I wouldn't be surprised if your rabbit became a little bit wary of you. Also, stress bonding has to be used in moderation. I think a lot of times people overuse stress bonding, and in a situation like this, it almost looks like the rabbits are bonded because no one's attacking each other. But in reality, they're kind of just too stressed and scared to do anything. This is not a time that I would take this as a good sign and just let them start living together or not do any other types of bonding. Stress bonding has to be used with other types of bonding because just because they're in a stressful situation, it doesn't mean that they're going to stay friends. For example, the same way that in a really horrible situation, maybe you and another person would kind of work together to get through it, but after the situation ends, you may or may not continue to be friends. Does that make sense? Because Butchin already looks pretty uncomfortable, but Sachin was actually doing okay. Maybe I should move it on this side so Sachin feels a little bit more nervous. I'm going to keep doing this. Again, I like to take things slow. I would rather do a step way longer than I need to than try to skip a stage in between. Okay. I might slowly start to remove the grate and I'll message you. I was going to say message you guys back, but I'll start filming again. I just want to make sure that I'm being present and aware. Also, just a quick tip when to utilize stress bonding. I don't really think that there's a right or wrong time, but I definitely wouldn't recommend it for initial introductions because you're usually putting them in a very small space and it can kind of just make the rabbits feel very cornered. Also, I think a lot of people see bonding processes like these and get completely turned off to even getting a second rabbit. And even though I think it's important that you have realistic expectations, especially if you go through bunny bonding and you're choosing the right companion for your rabbit, there's often little to no bonding process actually needed. For completely new rabbits, I would recommend stress bonding after they kind of have an idea of who each other are. So after your 90-day quarantine or at least 30-day quarantine, I know not many people do quarantine, but I really think it's so important and rabbits are so good at hiding their illnesses. So you really want to be sure that there's nothing that any rabbits could transmit to each other. So after the quarantine, I would recommend keeping the rabbits housed side by side. The first couple days, you probably want to keep them at least a foot apart, and then eventually you can actually have it so that the cage bars are touching and they can have slight interactions with each other. Switching litter boxes is also really good, or even switching cages entirely. Don't be surprised if litter habits are terrible during this time because they don't really see everything as their territory since another rabbit is constantly invading it. So they're constantly trying to remark and reestablish. So don't be worried if litter habits go a little bit AWOL. I think after initial introductions like that, stress bonding is a really good method to use because it forces the rabbits to not be too concerned to fight and to seek comfort, but it's not like you're seeking comfort from a total stranger. It's someone that they have some familiarity with. So I just took off the grate and so far so good. They are seeking comfort from each other, which again is the whole point of stress bonding. As you can see, Butchin is a lot more timid right now and scared than Sachin. Sachin actually looks pretty confident. Should I shake it a little harder? Why are you so confident, bud? There's no nipping or anything like that going on, which is a good sign. Again, why stress bonding works pretty well. This is definitely not them being bonded, but it's a good sign that they're starting to somewhat get along again and tolerate each other. Another thing that some people like to do during bonding is introduce food. I think this can go one of two ways. Eating can get the rabbits to feel more comfortable with each other, not want to attack each other, so that's always a good sign. But I also think it's important that you're a little bit cautious of food. Even for bonded rabbits, food is often a big source of fighting because a lot of times their like inner instincts just come out, and even though they both have the same amount of food, they just feel the need to fight or try to steal food from each other and piss each other off. So make sure you're being wary in that sense. I'm not going to introduce food right now, but if I do usually introduce food, I like to do something that's like a pretty low reward food, like romaine lettuce. They get lettuce often, so it's not like they're in a super big hurry to want to like fight each other for it. And I don't mind giving them tons of lettuce to avoid the fighting so that they don't feel like they need to steal each other's. They still probably will, but it usually is not as big of a deal. It's if I'm doing something super high reward like pellets or a treat. I decided I'd offer food to show you guys. So usually when they're stressed, they're not going to eat, but I'm gonna add some pieces in there. I'm gonna stop the shaking because they're already stressed out enough, so they're hopefully not going to fight. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of the food. Here you go, Sachi. Would you like some? Okay, Butchie. You're okay. Again, stress bonding, not always the nicest, but I think the end result of two rabbits getting along is worth it. And even though they look like they're really sweet and getting along, I have my dustpan ready to separate them if any fighting starts. So I stopped this shaking for a few minutes, and then Sachin finished his romaine lettuce. Butchin still doesn't feel comfortable enough to eat, and Sachin has already started grooming himself. It'd be nice if he would also groom Butchin in that, but I guess we'll see. He's kind of perked up a few times, but he's still pretty stressed out. Now, Butchin is also eating, still no fighting, so we're gonna take that. Oops, Sachin is still grooming himself. Good signs, good signs. Before, they weren't even willing to take food, and now Sachin is happy to beg and eat all the lettuce he wants. So it's been about 30 minutes since I've done any shaking, and both of the rabbits have calmed down a lot. They actually are almost cuddling. I haven't seen anyone groom each other yet, but Sachin is resting his head right on top of Butchin's face, so I think that's a really good sign. The thing I always mess up in bonding is not knowing where to stop. I usually know where to start, just not stop. I think I'm gonna move them from this into here, just to have a little bit of change of scenery and to give them a little bit more space. Still going to monitor them, and then I think I'll set up an X pen later today and watch them here while I reclean the rabbit room before I reintroduce them, just to see how that goes. Now, I know some people won't be thrilled at this, but I'm actually gonna leave them in this box and put the blanket over for about 10 minutes, just as a way to help them calm down and maybe sleep and start grooming each other. I can still check on them if I need to, and I'm gonna be right here if I hear anything, but I found that this is a really good way because they're usually just like too tired and bored to actually do anything mean. So they also have a little bit of lettuce in there for some food and some water if they get thirsty. And they'll only be in here for like 10 or so minutes, and then I'm gonna put them, I think I'm gonna set up an X pen and have them in that since they are doing so well, but I might just have to end up re-separating them and doing this again a couple other days, but they seem to be doing well, so that's a good sign. Remember how I said I'm really bad at knowing when to stop? It was like 5 minutes after I put them in, I saw a little bit of fighting, so I tried to carry them around a little bit, and I rushed them down here because I knew that it just been way too long and they were sick of each other. They both look really heightened again. I'm gonna have to do a health check to make sure. Oh. I don't think anyone's too hurt, but there is just like not quite a bit, but there's a little bit of fur that's plucked out, which obviously isn't the best sign considering how well they were just doing. Both of them look pretty exhausted, and I think they're ready to. Surprisingly, Butchin looks more on edge. That's the issue when you cover it. It sometimes helps to calm them down because they don't see anything and it's like dark and it's quiet, but it's also not the best because you don't really know who attacked who. Surprisingly, Butchin looks a little bit more on edge, so I wonder if Sachin attacked Butchin, but I'm not sure. I'll have to do some more observation. Just so you guys understand like the type of interaction they're having. Yeah. I wonder if having both of them in the room isn't really the best because they're just pissing each other off. So I think I'm gonna end up moving Butchin outside of the room. I thought it would be good for them to like still constantly be in each other's territory, because I don't want them to like forget each other since the fact that they were bonded so long. But I wonder if this is just causing more stress. I think that the best thing to do now is just to let them both relax in their cages, even though they are really on edge. This is like the place that they're most comfortable in, so I'm not going to set up an entirely different space for Butchin now and add him in, because I think that'd be more stressful. But I'm definitely going to work on making a cage upstairs, and I'm going to move Butchin to that just to give them a little bit more separation and hopefully increase my odds. Yeah, they are very much attacking each other, so maybe I will sacrifice a little bit of comfort to move them away. So I'm going to put a separate pen upstairs and get Butchin in there. So it's actually been a few days since that last clip, and there's obviously been some updates. So as you can see, the rabbits did really well in their stress bonding session, but immediately after they started fighting quite severely. Also, the room was just in terrible condition, and both the rabbits were extremely on edge. No one was really comfortable. They were constantly nipping at each other through the bars. So I thought the best situation would be to completely separate them. So I didn't really want them to be in the same room together. I set up a playpen for one of the rabbits out here. Sachin was out here and Butchin stayed in the room. And obviously they were still getting their daily free roam time, but everything was done completely separated so that the rabbits weren't exposed to each other. That was filmed on Saturday. It's now Tuesday night, so it's been about 3 days, and I'm finally letting them have very minimal interaction. I want to say that I think the way that I went about this little fight and the steps I did after were not really ideal, and I definitely want to make a whole follow-up video talking about things that I did wrong and should have done differently. But I think one of the main things that contributed to the relationship being so strained was the fact that they were in the same room together for so long. I think that if I were able to rebond them right after they had the initial I'm not sure if you guys can tell, but he's extremely on edge and he can't even see Sachin right now. He just heard something and that's triggering him so badly. I mean, I'm sad that they're fighting, but it's also really cool that I'm able to like capture all these behaviors on cameras. Because again, I feel like rabbit behavior is really obvious once you know what to look for, but when you're not comfortable with it, I don't know what he's doing. So my plan tonight, which I'm not sure is the best idea, seeing kind of how they're interacting now, but I do want them to be in these shared playpens and share a wall together. They've been separated for a couple of days, completely separated where they haven't really even seen each other, and they're still fighting this bad, so I don't know. Now I'm kind of regretting my decision. And I'm sure that someone will ask, the reason that the lop, Butchin, is in the pen is because he usually initiates the fights. So obviously this is not going to be the setup for the whole night. The whole night they each are going to have one half of the pen. I'm having it like this now, so Sachin has the opportunity, like he was just a couple minutes ago, to not at all be involved in the fight. And even Butchin has that chance if he wants to kind of go near the middle of the pen. So I'll obviously switch them around. It's not like one of them is going to stay in the smaller cage forever. What I was initially going to do tonight is to have the playpen set up like this and have them share a wall, but now I'm kind of regretting that decision. I thought it would be good. Hey, come here. You're okay. Maybe I'll do a stress bonding session and then I'll let them share the wall, because I haven't done stress bonding since Saturday, the last time I filmed it. It's so hard when you're bonding, especially in relationships like these. It's not the same way that you would do when you bring a new rabbit home, because when you're bringing a new rabbit home and you're bonding to like strangers, it's a clean slate. But in a situation, hey, you're okay. Oh, I did not mean to grab your ear. That probably didn't look very nice. Sorry, guys. But in a situation like this, there's already so much like past tensions that have been built up. And I wonder if when I first saw the fight, if I just did like a stress bonding, look, you can see how aggravated he is. Sachin's actually pretty calm right now because he's being pet. But I wonder if I did like a stress bonding situation then, or just like worked a little bit harder to try to bond them rather than separate them. I wonder if that would have improved their relationship. But I think the fact that they were separated but not able to really interact for so long really just probably wasn't the best idea. And I kind of want to show you guys. So Sachin, for one, is glued at my feet because he really likes having a bonded partner, and he doesn't have that now, so he's become very needy. Sachi, gonna come? Of course, now he doesn't prove my point. Butchin is kind of the same. He's just a lot more edgy towards Sachin, but towards me, there hasn't really been a big personality shift. I noticed Sachin has been quite a little bit more aggressive. So like if I stick my hand in the cage really fast, I don't think he has the best eyesight. So he doesn't really like that in general, but especially now if I like stick my hand in the cage, I will probably get nipped if I'm not careful about where I put it. Butchin, he doesn't have anything like that. He's just super on edge all of the time. As you guys can see, he's not really behaving the way that a comfortable rabbit would be. Also, this rabbit room is completely filthy. I just cleaned it in a different vlog literally a few days ago, and this is how bad it gets. When the rabbits aren't fighting and aren't having these issues, it doesn't get this bad even over like weeks of me. I think it would have probably take like over a month for it to get to this stage. And right now, since everyone is fighting and since everyone is so hormonal, it's gone into this extreme state of chaos in just a couple of days, which is awful. Okay, so my plan right now is to do a stress bonding. If you guys are wondering why it's on a chair, when it's a little bit higher up, they're obviously hesitant to jump out, which is helpful, but also it just adds a little bit more stress, which hopefully will help the bonding situation. Again, add in Sachin first. I'm gonna add in Butchin. Always the initial ad is scary because you haven't really built up any stress yet. So I'm gonna do that off camera so I can focus on them, but fingers crossed. Surprisingly, the initial ad went well. No one is fighting each other yet. I added them in with the divider and I just took it out really fast and I was like fully expecting to have to like shove it back in there, but they're actually doing okay. This is what I meant by the divider. As you guys saw, I usually like to add them both in like this so that they have the divider, but surprisingly there wasn't really any fight, so I'm gonna leave this. I'm not gonna do a whole lot of shaking. The smaller space in general makes them also less likely to fight because I don't know why. I know it's like a very common method for a lot of animals. Okay. Never mind. The smaller space does make them less likely to bite, but obviously it's not going to prevent it. I think it's like, okay, never mind. Okay, last time. The smaller space does make them less likely to bite because, I don't know, it's just like harder to do it and it's more uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that they won't do it. It's, again, I think Butchin is initiating. I have to rewatch that clip, but I'm adding in a divider. I'm not gonna shake it too much because I feel like that situation was stressful enough, but oh God, I need a stress bonding because this is awful. So I gave them both a little piece of carrot. I'm actually gonna try to remove the divider and see if the food can like distract them enough to not want to fight. Obviously carrots are a lot more high reward, so it is risky that they could try to bite each other for it, but yeah, okay. Okay, to be completely honest, rabbit fights are brutal and it's not really easy to like go through the bonding process and like watch it because obviously you love both your rabbits so much, and it's so frustrating when you, and I don't want to use the word frustrating because I feel like I'm not really frustrated at anyone or like at the rabbit specifically. It's just a whole situation because you buy two rabbits to enrich each other's lives and it's just terrible that they're fighting all the time. And like Butchin was meant to enrich Sachin's life and make Sachin's life better, and instead they're just hurting each other. So again, you can't really be mad at the animals for this. It's very natural. When you're having rabbits in captivity, it's not the same like they're in the wild. And regardless, our rabbits are domesticated. They're not like wild rabbits in the first place, but it's just hard. I feel really bad when I'm watching them fight, obviously. Just, it's brutal and it's like awful because both of them are stressed. You can both see them breathing hard. No one's really at peace, but I think it's also hard to decide at what point do you want to stop trying to bond, because I feel like they had such a great bond before, and part of me, I just can't imagine having them, like, I don't even care if they're bonded with each other. I've just seen so many social behaviors in rabbits that I would want them each to have a separate companion, so then it just brings up questions of like, do I want to get two more rabbits to try to like cross my fingers and hope that there'll be two rabbits that have two successful bonds. I can have two pairs, but that's just so much to take care of. Some people have success adding a trio and then that can like level things out, But then when you're adding another rabbit to the dynamic, you don't really know how predictable that will be, so that might not be a great mix. And then again, with trios, it's very likely that one rabbit gets left out or one rabbit doesn't fit in. And again, even if you're trying a trio, it's very possible that all 3 rabbits will need to be separated. So then you're back to the square one of, do I want to get 6 rabbits so that each of them can be bonded on their own? It's just a really messy situation. And I know a lot of you are kind of wondering if my stance on having rabbits in bonded pairs have changed, because prior to this, I've always advocated for rabbits being in pairs. I do want to say that even though it's always appalling to see fights like these, again, this is definitely not the worst that rabbits can do to each other. And even for Sachin and Bachchan, they've gotten in spats very similar to this even prior to being very well bonded. So it's not like I'm completely appalled and I wasn't used to this. I definitely seen stuff like this before, and I still promote having rabbits in pairs then, and I'm still going to promote it now. My main hesitancy is the fact that there really isn't a lot of rescues that are super educated and specialized in rabbits. I think one of the best things you can do to have rabbits that are successfully bonded is do bunny dating, because not all rabbit personalities are compatible. Even though, again, this bonding process looks super scary, there's so many people that if you choose to write rabbit, there's almost no bonding process. I think Tyler Ruggie talked about his experience with Desmond and Olive. Desmond has passed away now, but when he used to have his Flemish giant bunny, he took Desmond to a rabbit shelter, and he bonded to Olive immediately. And I even know that there's some rescue centers that'll actually offer like boarding services for the weekend. So you pretty much board your rabbit there, and then you come back and they have a bonded companion and they've done all the bonding for you. The thing with that is they probably wouldn't even put 2 rabbits like Sachin and Bachchan together. For one, male and male pairs aren't as compatible as male and female pairs. And again, when you have a ton of rabbits at your disposal, you're not going to try to force 2 rabbits to get along. They probably see these 2, be like, oh, they're fighting too much, let's try a different one. And they just try different personalities together and see what matches. But obviously, when you're having them as pets, you don't really just get to go through that. I'm not just going to give Bachchan away because he doesn't get along with Sachin, because I made the same commitment to him that I did to him. I've never really been a huge fan of just pushing every single person with a single rabbit to buy another rabbit. I think there's a lot of circumstances that go into that, and it makes sense to me why someone might own a single rabbit and not have the ability to get them a bonded companion. What doesn't make sense to me is why someone would willingly go out and get a single rabbit. I think you're just setting yourself up for failure in the future. Sachin was on his own for almost 3 years, which I think is a huge part of why they have such a hard time bonding, because Sachin's been in a bonded pair less time than he's lived alone. When you are getting 2 rabbits immediately from the start who are bonded, or at least who are 2 babies from the same litter and grow up to each other, they really don't know any other option, and you have a lot more likelihood of it actually working out. So even though I don't think that every single person with a single rabbit should go out and try to get a second rabbit for reasons like these and them not bonding, I think if you don't have a rabbit yet and you're only allowed to get one, I would highly, highly recommend waiting until your parents say that it's okay for you to get 2 rabbits and just get both of them at once. Because when you're getting a single rabbit and then eventually, even if you decide you want to add a second rabbit, that's not really the best way to go about it, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up this vlog here. Pet room is mostly clean. Everything is kind of just out here in a mess, and that's the rabbits. I left them in here while I was cleaning, so that was like 20-30 minutes maybe, and I had to leave the divider in, and that was relatively calm, thankfully, with the divider. I just added some food in there. He needs some extra hay, but they seem to be a little bit more calm, but that just could be because they're distracted because of the food. I think in short, the bonding process is just going to take a lot longer, and I don't know. I feel like every video I want to give updates, but I just have like no idea what it's going to be like. So I guess we'll see. Hopefully nothing's too serious. And also, these are not like permanent setups that you need for rabbits. Obviously this flooring isn't great. I'm gonna add in a fleece to Bachchan because I think he needs it more because he has less stuff. And both their water dishes have to be cleaned, so I'll be adding that in later. But I just wanted to close off for tonight because my phone's about to die. But thank you guys for watching and following along. I know these videos have been really chaotic, but hopefully they've been interesting. Okay, so bye. Actually, just kidding. I thought I'd do one last clip where I topped off the hay because I get a lot of comments with people upset that the rabbits don't have hay, and they do have 24/7 access to hay. It's usually when I film right after I clean everything, but right before I put hay in the litter boxes. Don't ask me why that's my routine, but now the rabbits' hay has been topped off and they just got their fresh water. So just wanted to show you guys, everyone is happy and healthy, I promise. If the rabbits weren't getting fresh hay every single day, they likely wouldn't be alive. So